10 stitches for lettering. I will embroider each letter using different stitches. For transfer, use friction heat erasable pen by Pilot. Good fabric tension is 50% of success, so tighten the screw, pull fabric and repeat until it's drum tight. I use 6 strands cotton moulinet thread. Knot on the end and we are ready for the first stitch. Back stitch. Come up and make short stitch. Come up stitch length ahead and go back down into the hole where you finished previous stitch. There shouldn't be any fabric visible between the stitches. Continue making them. Do the same for the next row. Horizontal stitches for the horizontal shape and vertical stitches for the vertical shape. To secure thread, flip the hoop and slide under stitches 2-3 times. Don't poke the fabric. Cut the thread and it's secured. Brick stitch. This one is a version of the back stitch. Make the row of back stitch. For the next row, shift starting point of your back stitches. Start it in the middle of stitches from previous row. The rest is the same back stitch. It's going to look like brickwork. Shift starting point for each new row. Same for the right part of the letter. At first make row of back stitches and shift stitches of the next row. All of this sounds harder than it is. The key is to try and practice. Satin stitch. I'm drawing the direction of stitches. It helps to change it smoothly in process. Come up through the lower line of the letter, as usual until knot hits the fabric, and go down into the upper line. Come up close to the first stitch and down. There shouldn't be any fabric visible between stitches. And continue until you feel the whole shape. Direction lines are handy on such curves. I'm not showing the whole process because it's a repetition of one stitch. Take hoop in your hands and start practicing. Also, it's only stitch 3 out of 10 and the video should end at some point. You can think about it like joining 2 points to spots with one stitch. Also, less strands you use, smoother your stitch will be. Padded satin stitch. Combination of 2 stitches you have just learned. Fill the letter with back stitch. And embroider satin stitch over it. The letter will have more volume. Also, instead of back stitch, you can make chain stitch. I'll show it next. So we have back stitch, brick stitch, satin stitch and padded satin stitch. Chain stitch. Come up and down into the same hole. Leave a loop. Come up stitch length ahead into the loop and pull needle and repeat. Go down into the entry hole. Leave a loop and go up through the loop. To finish row of chain stitch, come up, pull thread and go down into the same hole. Second way to make chain stitch. Come up and make tiny stitch. Come up stitch length ahead and slide under this tiny stitch without going through the fabric. Go back into the hole where you came up before. Repeat. Come up stitch length ahead, slide under these two threads and go down into the entry hole. It's called reverse chain stitch. You make the same steps with different sequence. E is not the easiest letter for the chain stitch. That's how mine turned out. Stem stitch. Make stitch and leave a loop. Come up to upper third of this stitch, a little bit lower than the stitch line. And repeat. Continue making rows until you feel the shape. I don't always keep the loop. The point is to start stitch under the previous one. Split stitch. Start just like you're making backstitch. But instead of going into the same hole, go into the lower part of the previous stitch, splitting it. And repeat. Feel the shape. With split stitch you can make color changes. These shades are not even close. I want to show you the principle. Use closer shades and less strands, and you have smooth color change. French knots. Go up and wrap thread around the needle. Place needle tip into the fabric near the entry hole. Pull the working thread so the wrap lies on the fabric, and pull the needle down while keeping thread taut. Come up, wrap thread 2 times, place tip near the entry hole, pull the thread, and go down while keeping working thread taut. And fill the letter with French knots. The other way is to make outline out of French knots. Embroider knots on the inner and outer line of the letter. This one is not a new stitch, it's a new use of satin stitch. You fill the space around the letter, but not the letter itself. I make vertical stitches, but they can be horizontal or diagonal, lots of space to experiment. Whipped back stitch. I hope you're starting to realize that one stitch can be used in so many ways. Embroider back stitch. Take the second thread and come up from the same hole. Slide under the stitch without going through fabric, and do it with every stitch. You can use the same color, allowing the look more continuous. If your needle catches the thread, use the back side when you're sliding under the stitches. In the end, go down into the same hole as the last back stitch. Couching stitch. You're going to need 2 threads again. Come up in the beginning of the line and place thread along the ladder. Come up at the stitch lengths under first thread and go down into the same hole, wrapping the first thread. And repeat. You can make any shape with couching stitch, and the color of threads can be the same. In the end, go down with your first thread. There are a lot more stitches you can use for lettering. Practice, experiment, have fun. Which stitch is your favorite? Hit like if you enjoyed the tutorial and join my Patreon page for early access. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video!